Well, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Whitburn,
Here.
Montgomery Stepp,
Here.
Vargas is absent, Hall,
Here.
Moreno. Can you speak into the mic, please?
Present.
Leiba Gonzalez,
Leiba Gonzalez here.
Goebel.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's move on to non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. Connor, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, hi, MTS Executive Committee. My name is Connor Proctor. I am a member of ISD as well. I have been advocating for open payments, which is where you can pay with your contactless credit card or Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or Google Pay for the bus and trolley for almost a year now. And I just wanted to share an experience. I'm actually in Europe right now in the past few days. And it was just an amazing experience to be able to tap my phone or credit card on the readers to be able to pay my transit fare. It was amazing as a tourist because I didn't have to figure out the system of how to pay. And then also I noticed that a lot of the locals were using it as well. The people that lived in London also used it. And I think it was just because it's so convenient. You don't have to go get a pass. You don't have to remember to reload your pass. You just tap and go. So I think it would be really awesome if we could do this in San Diego. Thank you.
Name, please unmute yourself now.
Good morning, MTS board. My name is Leif Gensert. I'm a member of RightSD. I can echo everything that Connor said. I myself lived in London for 2 years. I was using it every day. The locals used it every day. Additionally, I recently came back from a trip to Portland, which also had open payments. So, and that was just a very great convenience. So thank you for putting this on the agenda, and I hope we can move forward with this.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting on July 27th, 2023. Clerk, do we have any public comment on approval of the minutes?
We do not.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Member Hall to approve the minutes, and we have a second by Vice Chair Goebel. Any further discussion on approval of the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to our discussion and report items. We're going to begin with item number 4. That is project labor agreement and monitoring support services. Before we invite Samantha Leslie to present the item, let me give Member Leiba Gonzalez an opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to recuse myself, please, respectfully, due to a conflict of interest. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Member Leiba Gonzalez. We'll go ahead and allow him to recuse, and we'll give Samantha Leslie the floor to present the item. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. I will be presenting on the Project Labor Agreement, or PLA, and the PLA Monitoring Support Services Contract Award. So as background, a Project Labor Agreement, or PLA, is a negotiated agreement between a public agency and the Building Trades Council that goes over the terms and conditions relating to hiring practices and labor standards. The successful contractor on any applicable PLA project would have to agree also to these terms and conditions in order to be responsive on the solicitation. A PLA is authorized by state and federal law, as well as within our MTS's enabling legislation. And on October 14th, 2021, the MTS Board of Directors directed staff to negotiate a PLA with the building trades through MTS Board Policy 66. To prepare, we did develop what objectives we wanted to attain through the PLA based on Board of Director feedback and internal staff feedback. We reviewed other PLAs such as SANDAGs and the San Diego Regional Authority's PLA for Terminal 1. As we also contacted our contractors that have performed $1 million construction projects in the past for us to receive feedback. And of those that gave us feedback, they've said that they're familiar with PLAs based on their previous projects with other public agencies, and that there actually may be benefits with a PLA in terms of how the employee dispatch processes work over the current requirements related to skilled and trained, particularly for very unique and specialized work. So the PLA has been tentatively approved. Carol Kim, the business manager from Building Trades, approved it and received the NAP2 approval as of last Thursday. And the PLA is included as attachment A to this agenda. And it does meet the minimum requirements of the Public Contract Code and the Federal Executive Order. As required, it allows non-union or union contractors to bid on projects, and it has various procedures in place to ensure a harmonious relationship between the unions, the workers, and the contractor, so there's no significant delays on the project, for example, through work stoppages or strikes. The PLA will be effective after board approval and CEO signature, and thereafter any unions that want to benefit from the terms and conditions of this PLA would also sign on to it. It is a PLA with a 5-year term with automatic renewals for an additional 5-year, unless within 60 days of the expiration of the 5-year term, either party can request to renegotiate. It will apply to new solicitations for construction projects estimated over $1 million. It will apply to new master agreements for job ordering contract whenever those work orders are for construction over $1 million. It will apply to new solicitations for CCTV installation services whenever that work is in furtherance of a construction project over $1 million. And lastly, for any new architectural and engineering master agreement services whenever there's work involving geotechnical survey or inspection in preparation of a construction project over $1 million. This is a list of the upcoming construction projects we will likely be awarding in the next few years that would be under a PLA. We currently have ongoing A&E, dock, and CCTV contracts, so only when those expire and we need to go resolicit will the PLA be applicable on those contracts. There are a few exclusions listed in the PLA where the PLA wouldn't apply. This would include any work performed by our own forces, our employees, any routine maintenance work on our facilities or sites, and if ever the application of any governmental grant or funding source may not allow us to use those funds on a PLA. One of the components of this PLA also is the intent to use employees on the project dispatched from the applicable union hiring hall. There are exceptions where, for example, a non-union contractor who has their own employees may use their core employees, is what another word for it, on the project using this alternating dispatch ratio, but using your own core employee, then using a referred union hiring hall employee up to 3, and maybe more if ever there's a union hiring hall request that cannot be completed. The contractor does need to pay the fringe benefits and other employer contributions towards the union employee benefit fund for that. To help attract DBEs and small businesses and really increase the participation from DBEs and small businesses, there is an exception for these firms whenever they're a subcontractor on these PLA projects, that they can utilize a similar core employee union referral process, but an additional number of 5 core employees per craft. And they're also exempt from the requirement of paying the fringe benefits on behalf of the core employee to the union employee benefit fund. There's also a local hiring goal of 40%. So the contractor and the building trades will be working collaboratively on reaching a 40% local hiring goal for each construction project. So that will include all the zip codes in our service area. The contractor and building trades will also work collaboratively on developing methods to encourage participation in apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship readiness programs, and to refer and employ apprentices on each of our projects, as well as utilizing veteran recruitment programs as a way to get veterans on our projects as well. Lastly, there is a opt-in clause for joint development, private entities. So per MTS Board Policy 18, if there is a construction of a joint development project over $1 million, it must be performed either under a PLA or meet the requirements of a skilled and trained workforce. So if a joint developer does want to choose the PLA option and maybe they don't have a negotiated PLA already, they can opt into the terms of this PLA. It's almost just replacing MTS's name with their name instead of renegotiating from the scratch. Since MTS doesn't have in-house expertise on PLAs, this is new for us. We did go out and procure a PLA monitoring support services contractor. This contractor will be MTS's representative on these projects, or the project labor coordinator. They will be ensuring compliance with the PLA, doing monitoring and data reports on the PLA, both for staff and the board, at least annually. They'll be looking and reporting on how we're doing on our local hiring goal, how we're doing on utilization of DBEs in small businesses. They'll investigate any complaints that someone may have relating to the PLA, such as prevailing wage non-compliance. They'll be educating contractors on PLA requirements through pre-bid meetings, pre-construction meetings, PLA, pre-job meetings, and just ensuring we have effective and constructive communications between all the parties on the PLA as well. And so through the procurement and a best value procurement, and the details are listed more in detail in the agenda item, but we are recommending to award it to TSG Enterprises or the Solus Group. They are a certified DBE firm, and they did provide the best value proposal to MTS. They had great public agency experience with both labor compliance and PLA monitoring. Included work with the Chula Vista School District, as well as the Honolulu Area Rapid Transit District, or HART. Next steps upon board approval of the PLA will include in all new applicable solicitations the requirement to comply with the PLA, as well as start onboarding our new consultant to begin PLA compliance monitoring and reporting. And with that, it is staff's recommendation that the executive committee forward a recommendation to the board of directors to authorize the CEO to execute the PLA, to authorize the CEO to award the contract to the Solus Group for PLA monitoring support services, and authorize the CEO to exercise the options at their discretion. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I also, I believe, have here Carol Kim from the business manager from Building Trades. Is there any technical questions on the PLA? As well as the representatives from Solus Group, the PLA monitoring consultant, if there's any questions on that scope of work.
Thank you very much. All right, clerk, let's go ahead and take public comment.
Corey Schumacher, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning. Is it on? Okay, excellent. Good morning, board members. My name is Corey Schumacher. I'm the political director of IBW 569, representing 3,600 union electricians and power professionals in San Diego and Imperial counties. Today, I'm here to urge your approval of authorizing the CEO to execute the negotiated project labor agreement between MTS and the San Diego Building and Construction Trades Council. PLAs ensure the financial and physical safety of our communities. For example, the inclusion of local hire provisions creates a viable and legal way to ensure jobs created locally benefit local workers. This means the dollars earned on such projects are also spent in our communities, thereby multiplying the financial impacts of every local dollar earned by a factor of 2 to 4. In addition, through the inclusion of a skilled and trained workforce in PLAs, your construction projects will be more safe. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, data is clear. Work sites with a skilled and trained workforce are 19% less likely to have an OSHA violation than their non-skilled and trained counterparts, and receive 34% less violations per OSHA inspection. OSHA violations are predictive of dangerous events and occupational fatalities on construction sites. The increased safety on construction sites that utilize a skilled and trained workforce through the PLA is the foreseeable result of the structured ongoing safety training of a skilled and trained workforce. The benefits to executing this PLA are quantifiable. PLAs have a variety of added value for the MTS and the communities
30
MTS
seconds
serves. Thank you very much.
Asermio Estrada, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board members. Thank you so much for bringing this item today, forward today. My name is Anselmo Estrada, the political director for the San Diego Building and Construction Trades Council. I'm going to echo a lot of the comments of my colleague right here, Corey Schumacher. Again, what you're doing right now is bringing a real local jobs program to the MTS. It's good work, and we appreciate it. We hope that you support this action and move this to the full committee, or move this to the full board. Thank you so much.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
All right, thank you very much for those who commented. And let me just say how much I appreciate all the collaboration that has gone into crafting this agreement, the building trades, the member unions, IBW 569 we heard from, the laborers are here, the various contractors that participated in this, and of course, our MTS staff who coordinated all of this. Let's go ahead and begin our board discussion on this item, if there is any, and we'll begin with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on slide number 9, please. So if a non-union contractor were to bid on the job and get the job, that non-union contractor could only bring 3 employees from their firm, and everything else would have to be a union employee. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct, unless the referral request to the union hiring hall is not completed within 48 hours. They can then use an additional core employee.
So I'm kind of trying to figure out if the contract code says you don't have to be a union employee, how does a non-union contractor, aren't they penalized that they don't get to bring more of their own employees if this says you can only bring 3? And I thought, well, section 4.9 says employees are not required to become or remain union members as a condition of performing the covered work. So I've got a disconnect there. Can you help me figure out how a non-union contractor has to employ union employees after the first 3? Because I thought that wasn't something you could do under the state contract code.
So you're, as you mentioned, there's no requirement that a non-union contractor's employees must join the union. That is my understanding as well. As you mentioned, though, I think the intent of the PLA is to use the maximum extent possible of union laborers dispatched from those union hiring halls, even if that contractor hasn't worked, those aren't his employees, they haven't worked with them before. It seems to be a standard in the PLAs we were reviewing as well.
So we're comfortable that's legal, that you can say to a non-union contractor, you must employ union employees for the job if you want the job.
And this seems very standard under PLA, and it is my understanding it meets the minimum requirements.
All right, just checking. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, do we have any further comment? Member Hall.
I go back to that slide too. I was fine I understand the 3 employees. What happens if you need 30?
What happens when you get to 30?
Yeah.
What do you say?
I mean, you said if you have 4, then you need to, then you need to put it out. Does that go 5, 6, 7, 8 or what? I don't quite, that's why I'm confused on this.
Yeah, so my understanding is the first employee, the non-union contractor can designate can be their employee. Then they have to go to the union hiring hall, goes back to, designate my second core employee, goes back union hall, and up to 3. So now you have 6 employees now designated on the project, 3 of which are from the hiring hall, 3 of which are in your core employee. Then that 7th and after, you'd have to work with the union hiring hall completely, unless they were unable to complete your request.
If you put the bid in, basically is what you're doing. You're saying give 48 hours. I mean, do you have to do it for each employee or? Because now you're saying I need 20 employees.
Yeah, I understand that at the 30 days before the project, you kind of have to designate how many employees and core employees you need. So to try to not delay any designation of employees, it does try to happen before the project starts. But yeah, that's part of the discussion between the project labor contractor and the union about how many core employees and building trade union hiring hall employees we might need for that project.
I just see this being a problem down the line. If, if they're hiring their own employee, if I have 30 employees, I'm the employer, but I have to go to get union after each employee, it could cause a problem. Whereas my employees would basically just do the job at that point. So, and I don't mind having union employees in there. That's not the point. The point is we may just be causing one big mess by, having to go to the union each time. Again, if the understanding is fine, what's it say in writing is my concern as far as that goes with the union. I think we need to clarify that.
If I could step in as well, one of the things that this does do is it sets the kind of the game plan right from the start when they bid the job, so they know. So it does provide the contractor with certainty that if he's going to bid a contract with MTS, they must comply with these rules.
Okay. And then,
If I
ahead,
could just, the one other issue that, as we were going through this was new to a lot of us to kind of learn the background and how this works. We already by state law have to do a skilled and trained workforce, and the numbers of skilled and trained and how they qualify for that has gone up by percentage under the statute, each year. And so we have had some feedback from some of our contractors that sometimes it's actually difficult to comply with that. And there's not a cure for that. Like if you can't find them, if there's not a clear way to clear that violation or move on so you can still do the project. And so that has caused some of our contractors some concern. Whereas under the PLA, the feedback we got from them was because then if the union doesn't provide, an employee after the 48 hours, then they can go to their, back to their core employees, or that it really actually provides a clear way for them to cure that, and that was a more workable solution, which frankly was surprising to me. I thought we would get a lot of negative feedback from our contractors, but they expressed that this process would actually be easier for them to comply with those requirements.
So, and I apologize for, beating this down, but basically you run into a point where you do the 48 hours, you hire your own people, and then are they going to be able to come back in 72 or 96 hours and go, hey, we got some people, you got to fire yours and bring ours in?
My understanding from the reading of the
Yeah.
PLA is no, that they have that first thing. I don't know if we want,
I keep hearing understanding. I apologize.
well, because we haven't implemented it yet before.
Yeah,
So,
we
but
need to clarify.
our plain reading, and I don't know if we wanted to.
Yeah, no, it is a 40-hour strict rule that if they are unable to provide the requested employee with the requested experience, then that they can now designate their core employee.
2 years ago, we had the Black Contractors Union here, and they were kind of left out, I felt, of the process. Will they be left out this time?
I have not spoken with them, and so I don't have,
Okay,
I'm not sure.
all right,
on that.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Hall. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair. First, let me say thank you to Samantha for and Carol. I think you were the head folks at the table for this proposed language in the attention to detail. I appreciate it. I particularly noticed some of the exemptions for the smaller businesses, which we talked about a lot. And I think when we talk about the Black Contractors Association and the members of that association, that's kind of where they would fit in with those exemptions, and having more core employees be able to be on a job as they are potentially getting used to working under PLA. So I agree that well, I've said this over and over. We've had a lot of conversations about this, that I think there are some nuances with the smaller businesses that I think this is certainly helping to address those and cover some of those issues. I wanted to, with regard to the monitoring support, Samantha, you mentioned a reporting mechanism back to the board. You said at least annually. How does that so if the board requested additional reporting, then that would be possible.
Yes, I do think we generally award about 1 to 3 construction projects over $1 million a year. And so 1 year might be a great time frame in terms of we have enough data to report back to the board, but we can definitely do it more frequently, and we can definitely direct them to report on specific items that we want to look more closely at as well.
Okay, all right, great. And then I just wanted to touch base on apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships, especially when it comes to the local hire requirement. I'm just making sure that that is a part of what we are monitoring. I think part of the issues are the deployment, right, and making sure that we are continuing to put local folks through a pipeline. And part of the ways of doing that, and we have a pre-apprenticeship program within District 4 at the Educational Cultural Complex. The pre-apprenticeship part is very important for a lot of the people that we may not normally reach to be in the trades. And so focusing on that is very, very important, I think, to make the local hire goals and also to present the community benefit that we know that a PLA certainly can be a part of. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on those things. Did you have any additional, I don't know that there was much of a focus on the apprenticeships in the presentation. Did you have any additional feedback that came up in negotiations around making sure that we concentrate on pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programming?
So this provision is in the PLA. I also know that it is meant to have a collaborative process between the project labor coordinator, the contractor, building trades unions on developing the appropriate outreach. I think it will probably depend on the contractor, how long the project is, and they can do very specific outreach and work on partnerships to ensure we're getting a steady flow of participation into these programs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the thought that has gone into this and looking at all of the different aspects of how the PLA can truly benefit our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will entertain any other further comment here. If not, then I have a couple of questions I just wanted to follow up on in deference to the questions that were raised by Vice Chair Goebel and Member Hall. You mentioned that some of the contractors, BizLanders, found that a PLA might actually make it easier to comply with some of the state regulations. Were both union contractors and non-union contractors at the table and part of that discussion?
Samantha can follow up on this because she was part of those initial, but we basically invited all the contractors that had done these types of $1 million or more projects recently for MTS. So we didn't go out generally to the community. We went to the contractors that we've worked with that we know are qualified and able to complete our jobs, because we wanted to understand if there were particular concerns that they had that going into a PLA would make it harder for them to complete our jobs on time. And so those were the contractors that we talked to.
And they both generally included both non-union contractors and union contractors.
And your takeaway from the conversations was that these contractors who historically have done work with MTS were comfortable with the agreement that is before us?
Yes, they didn't have any significant concerns moving forward to a PLA, and again, did see some benefits over the current skilled and trained workforce requirements.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick question for Ms. Kim, since you have a lot of experience locally with PLAs, are the answers that you have heard to the questions that were raised in our conversation consistent with your understanding of the agreement and your local experience with PLAs?
Yes, they are consistent with those things.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, well, it seems like let's go back to Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Just real quick on that. Thank you, Karen, for pointing that out. I would love to see some of our contractors that we work with often engage in also building that pipeline through the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. That would just be, I just want to make sure that I say that. I think that that's very important and I think they'd be willing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of, as part of the PLA, then for these projects that are over $1 million, one of the things that they'll have to do is work, to create those programs. And so I would imagine the first couple of projects will figure out what works, and then subsequently contractors will just kind of not necessarily create a whole new program that they'll, continue it. But that would be the goal. And that's one of the things that the PLA monitoring support services contract would do, that they would help participate in those conversations and do that coordination so that we make sure that our contractors know and are part of that process.
Okay, thank you for the time, Chair.
Vice Chair Goble.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Hall raises a good point on his question. If a contractor goes to the union hall and they can't find somebody in 48 hours, and so they bring one of their own core employees, it's not spelled out in writing that that core employee is protected for the remainder of the project. His question was 3 days from now, well, we now have a union employee who can do that. It's not spelled out in the agreement that core employee is protected for the remainder of the agreement. I would suggest that language be included.
I see that Ms. Kim has come to the table. Perhaps you could answer the question or clarify on the record for us.
Definitely. So I will note that if we are not able to meet the 48-hour dispatch requirement for any contractor who comes to our union halls asking for specific employees with specific skill sets, et cetera, in the time given, then those core employees are now on the table for the remainder of the scope of that particular contract. It's not something where we come back in 2 days later and go, oh, we've got one, so now you've got it. That does not happen. So if we cannot meet it, it actually takes it off the table for the union dispatch, and it goes to the core employee or to the core employees of the contractor.
And just to ask legal, Samantha and Karen, do you feel that the language is explicit in the agreement enough that it protects that 48 hours?
I didn't say any exceptions to that rule. It does say it can go straight to allowing a core employee. It doesn't say anything about it can be changed after the fact. That was the first time I thought of it that way, but I thought it was clear as it was written.
Well, contracts are meant to spell out things so that there's no uncertainty in some areas. My recommendation is to eliminate that uncertainty. We have understandings, we have practices, but we don't have certainty. And I don't think it's a problem to add certainty.
Understanding works great until you get to the courtroom.
I mean, it seems, since our understanding aligns with what the building trades understanding of what it means, that, we, after this meeting, can go back and talk to them and find out if there's some clarifying language to put into that section that makes it clear that if the employee is not provided within the 48 hours and then contractor uses a core employee, that core employee is allowed to work on the project for the remainder of the contract.
All right. I will go ahead and make a motion. And could we put the language of the staff recommendation? Thank you. I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt the staff recommendation with direction to staff to confer with the building trades on the 48-hour requirement and explore a clarification that could be included in the agreement that is brought back to us at next week's board meeting. Is that acceptable to everybody?
I'll note it. I guess you're on the board, I'm sorry. But yes, like staff can work with that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and do that then. Is there a second to the motion from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a roll call on this, clerk.
Whitburn,
Yes.
Montgomery Stepp,
Yes.
Vargas is absent. Hall,
No.
Moreno,
Moreno, absolutely, yes.
Leyva Gonzalez has recused themselves. Goble,
No.
the motion passes with 3 members voting yes, 2 members voting no, one member abstaining, and one member absent.
All right, thank you very much, Clerk. That motion carries then, and Member Leyva Gonzalez can return if he's in the vicinity. We will go ahead then and move on to item number 5, which is an informational update on the Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service. And Dennis Desmond will provide this presentation once he gets settled in. So once you're ready, please proceed with the presentation.
Well, as he's getting ready, I'll mention to you that this particular service that we're going to discuss today is actually one of the most complicated relationships that we have with the North County Transit District. And so it is something that we wanted to bring to your attention. And we've actually brought it to the boards in the past, probably 3 times over the course of the last 17, 18 years I've been here. So we'll have at it.
Thank you and good morning. The discussion today is regarding a microtransit service that we operate in the Sorrento Valley area, northern part of our jurisdiction. And I'll give a little bit of background and history. When the coaster started service in 1995, they had a station in the Sorrento Valley area. That station is very remotely located, not particularly within walking distance of very much. It was evident right away that some type of a first mile, last mile service was needed in order for that station to be effective. There was discussion at the time whether that service would be operated by North County Transit District as it wholly and entirely supports the coaster and coaster ridership, or whether it would be operated by MTS since it's in the MTS jurisdiction. Ultimately, it was decided that MTS would operate the service, and we've been doing so for the last nearly 35 years. Initially, the intention was that this would be set up with some seed money from various agencies at the time, including APCD, MTS, NCTD, et cetera, and that after the first year or two, the funding for the service would be taken over by the private employers up in the area. Unfortunately, for the first 10 to 15 years of the project, there was great efforts on the part of elected officials, agency officials, et cetera, to coax employers up there to support this service financially, and those were essentially all unsuccessful. We have not received any funding from private entities for this service, and MTS has been funding it entirely for almost the last nearly 35 years, with the exception of the last few years. North County Transit actually now financially supports about half of the cost. So the current service consists of 5 different routes serving Sorrento Mesa, University City, UCSD, Torrey Pines, and Carroll Canyon areas. You can see a map of the routes up there now. We do offer route deviations for areas that aren't served by MTS access. It operates peak hours only during weekdays, and essentially we meet all of the southbound coasters in the morning, and so people coming in from North County get off the coaster at the station, get on our buses. We take them in these 5 different areas. Then in the afternoon, our buses come back out. They pick up people in these different various areas, bring them back to the stations, and meet the northbound coaster trains for folks going back up to North County. So we have 4 train connections in the morning peak and 4 in the afternoon peak. There are a couple of additional PM peak trains that are served. We can't serve because of the timing with these 5 buses. So North County Transit actually operates 2 trips to serve those. We operate this out of our Copley Park division in the Kearney Mesa area. And the cost for the service is about $550,000 a year. Again, NCTD now pays 50% of that on 4 routes, and the UCSD route, they pay 100%. As Sharon mentioned, it's complicated. They also reimburse us $1 per boarding. Back in the recession, in the early 2000s, we decided that we needed fair revenue from this route. And most people obviously are coming from the coaster, so they've got a coaster pass. But we decided that we needed additional fair revenue to support that. We were ready to institute a $1 per boarding fare, and North County opted to pick up that cost, so it would be free to their riders. So they also reimburse us $1 per boarding. The ridership on this Sorrento Valley, pre-pandemic, we were carrying about 330 passengers a day on 4 routes. In January 2020, we actually started the UCSD route. It was an inauspicious time to begin a new route. 2 months later, of course, the pandemic hit, but that's the UCSD route. It was a route previously operated by UCSD. They decided they didn't want to operate it anymore. MTS picked up the route, and now that's the route that NCTD pays 100% of the cost for. So even with that new route, we're now carrying an average of 130 passengers a day. So it's about 1/3 of what it was pre-pandemic. So when you compare that to how our other system and routes have recovered from the pandemic, system-wide, we're at about 80% recovery on our system. The rest of our bus routes were at about 66% recovery, and the Sorrento Valley here is again below 30% recovery. So it's been very, very slow to recover. When you look at this on a per trip and a per hour basis, I'll go back to that. When you look at a per trip or per hour basis, we're carrying about just over 3 passengers per trip. That's fairly low. And then our average passengers per hour is 5.2. Before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, it was over 16. So again, less than 1/3 of what we were doing pre-pandemic. To look at the 10-year ridership on the Sorrento Valley, it obviously follows the coaster ridership somewhat closely, although it does decline faster. You can see Sorrento Valley ridership actually started declining in FY17 before the coaster really began its decline, and then we hit FY19. Of course, the pandemic, and then the coaster connection's been slower to rebound than even the coaster, and again, slower than our own service. There's several reasons, several things that really impact the ridership. One is that the coaster connection is very sensitive to the trends in employment in the tech and biotech sectors up in Sorrento Valley. The largest employer is Qualcomm. Qualcomm's had their ups and downs in terms of employment. Qualcomm actually operates some of their own shuttle service up there. The levels of service they have operated on that has gone up and down over the years. So that's had an impact on the coaster connection. And the vast majority of the riders that are on this service are riders who do have a vehicle available to them. And so they make that choice every day, whether they're going to ride the coaster and the coaster connection or they're going to drive. And this is an area where parking is largely free, unlike areas like downtown, et cetera, with UCSD and the hospitals being obvious exceptions to the free parking. So our policy 42, MTS board policy 42 does provide that we come to you or come to the board of directors with information on low performing routes with consideration of what we might be able to do to improve those or discontinue those routes. The service is very important, obviously, to North County and to the coaster ridership. Sorrento Valley is an important stop for the coaster. We've actually been in discussions over the past year with NCTD about taking over this service in some form, whether it's the 5 routes that we operate now or whether they do something else with demand response type service or something would be their option. One of the reasons why this is a critical junction point now is because the 6 buses that we use on these 5 routes, we have 5 buses and then a spare. The 6 buses that we use are past their useful life in terms of mileage and age, and they need to be replaced. If we intend to continue this service, we'll need to put in an order to replace these buses as soon as possible. So we're bringing this to you with some comments. Our intention, our recommendation would be to look towards next month at the board to have a public hearing to discontinue these 5 routes because of their low performance and because of the investment that would be needed to continue them. And then continue at the same time to work with NCTD on a potential transition where they could take over the service, the operation, the management of either the service or replacement. So the cost savings would be approximately $300,000 a year. And again, that $2 million in capital cost that's going to be required to replace those buses as soon as possible. So with that, we wanted to bring this to the attention of the EC and not just show up at our board meeting next month with a public hearing and perhaps some public comments, and then get your feedback before we proceeded.
Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, thank you. We will now open board discussion on this item, beginning with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Dennis, thanks for the good presentation. Very quick and easy, always great. My question is for those who have a requirement for paratransit or other things, that would still be part of the program and not part of the discontinuation, correct?
So the requirement for MTS access is related to the service area where we provide the fixed route service. There are some slivers of this area that are not otherwise covered by MTS access. So we have some fixed routes in the area, routes 921, route 985, et cetera, that cover most of it with MTS access. There are some slivers that would be uncovered.
And would those riders not have service as a result of this kind of change?
The ridership is very, very low on access. In fact, this service, in the past, we've done all demand response on this service. We've done a variety of different service models to try and make this work better over the years. We've done all demand response. In the past, we actually didn't have wheelchair accessible buses. We purchased wheelchair accessible buses, very, very low use on those, very, very few requests for route deviations. So we don't feel that it's going to be a big impact at all, actually.
Okay, thanks for the information.
Any other comments? Member Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. How much has MTS spent in the last 35 years on this?
It's an interesting question. I haven't tallied it up. In the past, the cost to operate this was about $1 million a year. So prior to the recession, we've actually operated as many as 10 routes in the area. Two of those, it's gone up and down. Two of them were supported by Caltrans as mitigation for a while. Those two went away, and then we had 8 regular routes. During the recession, we cut this down to 4 routes. We've actually, as Sharon mentioned, we brought this to the board before to discontinue this service. At that time, we kept 4 of the busiest routes and discontinued 4 of them. So the costs have gone down and that we've cut the service a little bit over the years. But in the heaviest years, we spent as much as $1 million in supporting the service.
Would you be able to bring that figure to the board in 2 weeks? Is that
yeah.
something you could?
Yeah, we could probably calculate it up. Maybe I could check with Larry if
It's its own,
financials are
yeah,
available.
it's its own cost center. So I think that we could probably do that.
Thank you.
And we'd also have to look at the vehicles themselves has a 7-year life. So we've replaced
Yeah.
vehicles every 7 years
Well-
and the cost of those have gone up substantially. Given there's not as many players in the marketplace. We can't even get those vehicles sometimes. The procurement department, tries to get people to bid on them. It's
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Sure.
I'd like to see that figure and, I mean, I absolutely would support discontinuing a service, that's not justified by ridership figures or, social equity concerns. So, first and foremost, I want to thank MTS staff for being vigilant. I think it's difficult to say as an agency, hey, this isn't working, so we should change it. I sit in the city's audit committee, so oftentimes it's hard to say, hey, we messed up and, move from there. But I also want to reflect that we're really lucky MTS or Sandag never invested in a capital project to build a gondola at the Sorrento Valley Station, as this agency once proposed. I think while the bus lines could be easily discontinued or relocated, a permanent capital project like a gondola is much harder to discontinue or to deploy. I have brought up as a board member the possibility of this type of service at the Cross Border Express. MTS has stated that the facility would have to pay for it. CBX would have to pay for it. And for those of you who don't know, CBX is a cross-border terminal that takes folks into Rodriguez Field. I don't know how many millions of people per year go through Cross-Border Express, but they've been extremely successful. But I do want to reflect as an agency, because the agency has told me the facility would have to pay for it. We'd have to get a sponsor. And we have the numbers there. So it's really disheartening to hear that we've been spending what sounds like close to be $35 million on really, nothing, essentially, right? And that it's taken us 35 years to say, hey, this isn't working. Although I do commend you bringing it forward and saying it's not working. So I would like to, and I want to explore other possible minibus routes to connect high demand locations to our trolley system. I just mentioned the cross-border facility in Otay Mesa. I think it would be really interesting to see what could happen if we connected to the Iris Rapid. Deploying the minibuses, potentially maybe using the minibuses that we already have, that we already paid for. I think it's a great opportunity. This is an informational item, right, Chair? So there's no action, but thank you for bringing this forward. And like I said, I would absolutely be supportive of discontinuing this service in Sorrento Valley and looking at exploring minibus route down at the Cross-Border Express in Otay Mesa. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Moreno. Just one question for you. The staff recommendation is to bring this back for a public hearing at the October meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that when you would like to hear okay, so in time for that October public hearing, the historical costs. All right. Any other further board discussion on this item? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to hearing the public hearing in October. Item number 6 is an informational update on the Spring Street Station transit-oriented development. And we're going to invite Karen Landers and Sean Maya to present this item.
Good morning. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Spring Street. And the next agenda item, Sean Myatt, our manager of real estate assets, is going to go over kind of where we are in the rest of our TOD program. But this is a TOD agreement that MTS is in the middle of negotiations. We're getting ready to bring it back to the full board for approval. And there were some issues that we wanted to run by the executive committee to make sure we're on the right track. Back in February, the executive committee authorized us to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with Affirmed Housing to negotiate a proposed development at the Spring Street Transit Center in La Mesa. And at that time, we recognized that the issues really to be negotiated were replacement transit parking requirements, what would be the final apartment types and counts of the project, and other amenities that would go with it. And we have been working on that since then. So just to give you a sense of where the project is on the housing side, the original proposal was for 152 apartment homes. It was a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And to try to compare the two, that had 264 bedrooms. Since then, working with Councilmember Dillard and others, and looking at the mix, there was a request to see if we could shift some of the studio down to 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And so Affirmed went back, looked at the design, saw what was feasible. And so their current proposal is of 147 apartment homes, but with more of the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So it's actually 10 more bedrooms, so 274 rooms. And so it actually would result in higher occupancy potential, even though it's a smaller number of units. This is just some of the renderings that they've provided us of what the scale of the project would look like. And then the other amenities that would be at the Spring Street, they have committed to providing a transit patron restroom. We're still working on where that would go in the facility, and an MTS operator break room. There would be a community room for residents. They would improve the landscaping at the site, and they would also have significant resident bike storage. So the issue I really wanted to talk to you all about today and get feedback on was parking. So, you know, our understanding of the policy direction that we have had from the board on parking, you know, has been, you know, number one, when we amended the TOD policy to really encourage affordable housing developments, that was on the assumption that that was kind of a win-win for MTS, that if you have these developments on our transit station property, that it would increase ridership. It is just a fact that some of our riders are lower income. And so if you're a resident of one of these facilities, we think it's more likely that you're going to ride transit. And so that then we would gain new riders by hosting these projects. Also, to the extent practical, when we're looking at citing these and deciding how much of our station property we can give up, that we need to maintain enough parking to meet our existing transit ridership needs. And so we don't want to lose our current riders by taking away a parking space that's the only way they can get to the station. But the direction we had at that time from the board was, we don't want you to be requiring additional parking beyond today's current needs. And so that is kind of the philosophy that we've been going through to see that as a win-win of how do we gain new riders and not lose current riders on these projects. So in that sense, that's where we are. At the same time, we have had a parking study and analysis that you got a little bit of a peek at, but not all of the details on. And that will be coming back to the board that Chen Ryan was doing on several of our TOD sites. And so one of the things that we agreed with Affirmed is that we would wait to negotiate the parking needs at this site until we had the results of that analysis so that we could use that to feed into it. And so what has come out from that study, just I guess to take you back, the original proposal that Affirmed had given us was proposing only 63 transit parking replacement. And that the resident parking would get 117 for a total of 180 spaces. The Chen Ryan Associates parking study looking at Spring Street determined that the current parking need and use is 159 spaces. But that then looking forward to Sandag's RTP, the need forecasted out to 2035 would be as much as 242 spaces. And so what we did in talking to Affirmed, trying to figure out what is feasible, what could be done, Affirmed went and looked at it and determined that they could, their new design with the 147 homes did increase the parking allotment from 180 on the site to 212. So they were able to get 32 more spaces out of the design. And they felt that they could reduce their need down to 53 spaces. So that's about one space for every third unit. And that then they could give MTS that 159 that would support our current ridership needs. They did confirm for us when we were asking about, well, what if we reduce that or did anything, would they be able to increase the density? And, you know, and they confirmed that no, they've maximized the housing density that they can get at the site and make their property like financially feasible to go get funding, you know, like that they are in that sweet spot. And so even if we told them we don't need 159 spaces, that they wouldn't increase the density. We wouldn't get any kind of gain in residents out of that process. Conversely, if we needed to increase the density, that would impact some of the viability of the project. And certainly if we had to go up to the 242 number, that would require structured parking, which would increase the project cost, which might affect its ability to get funding. So ultimately, we felt like this allocation of agreeing to 159 spaces for transit, that met the prior direction that we'd gotten from the board and was a little bit in that sweet spot. But we wanted to talk to the board about it. To the extent that there's concern about that 242 number, there is a lot of parking capacity at Massachusetts Avenue Station. And so to the extent that people are driving are not necessarily super close to the Spring Street station, that is a viable alternative for them in La Mesa to go park at. And that is something that was acknowledged in the Chen Ryan Associates study as well, that would also be an alternative if the full 242 was not available at the Spring Street location. So our next steps would be to finalize the parking allocation and other details for the project. And then we would draft that disposition and development agreement that had all the material terms of what this project would be. And so barring any kind of big issues that we need to go back to the drawing board on from our discussion today, we would be targeting the October board meeting to bring that to you. So with that, it's questions, comments.
All right, thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do the original DRA. Please unmute yourself now.
Good on you guys for adding a bathroom. I'm actually surprised that there's a bathroom in there. But the whole parking spots thing, you guys, in your, limiting the parking spaces, so you're going to de-incentivize people to basically be able to drive. If you live at that place, there's more parking spots for people that take transit than for the people that would be living in that facility. So none of that stuff is going to be like your whole plan with that, and getting people not to drive is never going to work. And you're just going to create more problems by saying that people can go park down somewhere else. What happens when those parking spots too get, redesigned and they get taken away and you add something totally different? This is the plan. Like, we see it clearly. I just don't think it's in the benefit of the people at all to be removing parking spots and just, kind of pushing them down the road if they needed to park. But I guess good on you for getting a bathroom. That's it.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We'll now open board discussion on this item with Member Hall.
Just a quick question. If you go back to the residential parking, it was 53, went to 53. Is that going to be dual use? I mean, obviously people are going to be able to make it dual use, but in other words, there's 159 for transit. I mean, 1 and 3 probably, I don't see one. I see 1 and 2, 1 and 1 having a car. And so that's why you have 100 spaces floating out there. I just wanted to know if they'll be able to park in both places.
Well, we talked to Affirmed about it if they thought that cutting their parking allocation down to 53 would impact them, and they did not have any concerns. They thought the project would be fine without that. We generally try to draft into these agreements that they cannot assume that they're going to get any of our transit parking, because otherwise then, the assumption would be that everyone would just park for free in the transit parking. And so we put pretty strong limits on that in our ground lease and documents. MTS always at any time could voluntarily temporarily allow people to use them, but we are anticipating that most of our parking lots in the future are going to need to be gated so that they can be preserved for the transit riders and not used by residents.
Somebody's having a 4th of July party, they're going to probably use a lot.
We would encourage their guests to use transit to get there.
Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. How did CRA parking get to our current need is 159 and going to 242? What were some of their assumptions about why we would need more travel?
So I'll let Dennis answer that. I will say that just for your information, the 63 number that was originally in Affirm's proposal, they had done that on a 1-day parking count in July of 2021, which is still recovering from the pandemic. And Chen Ryan's studies, when they did it, they came up with a current actual usage of 159. And then Dennis can talk about how they get over the next 22 years to 242.
Thank you. 2 things. For the current counts, they actually put cameras at the station, so they got several days of counts. And that wasn't just to get the number of vehicles, but it was to get the ins and outs to figure out when people were coming and when they were going, so they actually could identify individual vehicles. For the future counts, for the 2035 counts, they use the travel demand model from SANDAG. So that actually incorporates all of the data from the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan, which, as you will recall, the 2021 version of the Regional Transportation Plan envisioned a very vast expansion of transit service. So essentially doubling frequencies on buses, doubling frequencies on rail, et cetera. So all of that expansion of transit greatly increased the number of people using the transit, and in most stations increased the number of parking spaces estimated to be required. Now, of course, SANDAG visits the Regional Transportation Plan every 4 years, so that model may look different the next time they run it, but that's essentially the basis for these numbers.
Okay, good information. Thank you. A question on the 53 spots. I think it would be helpful if we have other transit-oriented development that's already been built to know how many units and how many parking spots, to get a sense of relative usage or demand. I mean, we just opened up market rate housing with not as many spots as there are units, but this is affordable housing. So it's a different kind of a client. So I think there's one down in Chula Vista or IB that was, we even talked about using a shuttle to get people from. So some benchmarks would help with this information.
Sure. So I don't have those off the top of my head, but when we come back to the board in October, we can certainly bring that information. I would just say off the top of my head, this is the lowest parking ratio of a residential project that of what's on our system. So the rest of them I think are closer to one parking space for every 2 units, but I'll pull the numbers and confirm.
Yeah, Grace are affirmed over at Grantville, it's 0.6.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So for those that are already in existence that have been operating, we would have information such as, well, we found that people are parking on the street.
So
We would
only have,
never know that.
yeah, we only have one project that was pure 100% affordable that has opened, and that is at 62nd Street. And so I do not remember off the top of my head what that parking ratio is, and I'd have to look at it. All of our other projects are in some stage of kind of permitting development. And so we have numbers that we've agreed to, but we don't have actual, like, what's happening in the field, which has been why this is a little bit of a difficult, these are philosophical questions, and we're trying to come up with the best balance that we can, but we don't have specific real world data. I think Affirmed feels that they will have no trouble renting these units. I mean, and it's a sad state. I mean, the housing crisis is so bad that people feel overjoyed to get on this list and get into one of these units. And so they do not anticipate not being able to find a tenant because there's not a parking space. And we would hope by having them have access to transit that would make that, that decision a lot easier, for them and their family to bear, because they will have close access to transit.
And it's high quality transit. I mean, there's developments happening in the city of San Diego where there's no parking associated with them, and it's not even on quality as the high quality as the trolley. It's really the direction that development is happening today.
Pull what data?
Member Moreno.
Great job. Thank you. This is certainly not in an area that I represent as an elected official, but it's in the Mesa, you said, right? But I think these were, we got here because of our Palm Avenue trolley stop, right? Where we were getting numbers and we didn't know how many parking spots in regards to ridership or residential we wanted to have as an agency. I would like to say that I think our philosophy, or I should speak for myself, my philosophy as an MTS board member is first and foremost looking at our ridership, making sure that our agency is able to continue, right? And that we actually grow our ridership. So that is why the parking study is coming forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers. Because as you very well stated earlier, when you have a company that comes in and does a study, a scientific study, right? The numbers are very different than what perception is. So this is, I think, very, very important. I am supportive of this. I know it's an informational item, but you wanted our feedback. But I think putting on my MTS hat, that is separate from my District 8 council member hat, right? Where all I'm looking at in the city of San Diego is housing, 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 which is certainly, it bleeds into other facets of what I do. But as an MTS board member, I need to make sure that the bottom line exists, right? That it continues. And I've been on this board now for 5 years, and I keep on beating that horse that we need to focus on our ridership. And I think this revised proposal reflects that. And I commend you guys for bringing this forward. And studies matter, right? At the end of the day. So thank you for that. And thank you, Chair, for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, great job on that. We'll look forward to seeing it again when it comes forward. I think you said next month.
The goal would be to bring the full final agreement to the board in October.
Terrific. Thank you. All right, item number 7 is a status update on the real estate and joint development program, and we'll turn it back to you, Mr. Myatt, to present this item.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, this is an informational item. And this is a general overview. We're going to go over our transit-oriented development program holistically. So there's not going to be, it's a general overview. We'll start with the city of San Diego, move to South Bay, and then the southeast and eastern parts of our service territory. And just as a quick map here, you've got the under contract sites are represented with the red star, and the opportunity sites are the green stars. So the green stars are the ones where we don't have a negotiating partner at the moment, and the red ones are basically we have either an E&A, DDA, ground lease, or we're actively negotiating with some of the folks. So at Grantville, you know, that's our most recently opened one. We've got the Union Grantville, the market rate affordable, excuse me, the market rate building with 250 homes. And that was just recently completed. And Affirmed Shoreline, just on the same site, just slightly to the west, they'll have 126 homes, and that will be, construction will end late 2023 or early 2024. Rancho Bernardo, up in the very north part of our territory, is Affirmed Skyline project with 100 homes and approximately 14,000 square foot of office space. Construction is supposed to start in late 2023. Down at 12th and Imperial, right where we're sitting today, where MTS is working with the San Diego Foundation to bring a new development out of the ground there. At Bar Boulevard, we have a DDA with, once again, Affirmed that was signed back in March, and construction is estimated to start in the first quarter of 2024. Palm Avenue, 4 acres of the MTS site were and that is with National Corps and Malik. The DDA was signed in 2021. There's approximately 390 units. And then once again, the opportunity sites where we have sites that have been identified, but we don't currently have a negotiating partner. Some of them obviously have challenges. Euclid Avenue is has significant transit center needs. So a future partner would need to be able to accommodate those needs. 47th Street, and then the Riverwalk development, which is currently right now landlocked, waiting on the Riverwalk development to be constructed. And then we will have a future new station there and a possible transit-oriented development. Just real quickly, Grantville, we have a market and an affordable component here. The Affirmed Shoreline here on the left with 100% affordable. Said open later this year, early next year, 126 homes. And also within that, Affirmed was able to, we were able to partner with Affirmed and get a 1.4 million grant for some station improvements. So you will see paint and landscaping and hardscaping improvements. So that was a very good nexus for both MTS and Affirmed to go out and get that grant money to make the station look a lot nicer. And then moving on to Gray Stars Union Grantville, it is open right now. I know some folks in the Navajo community have asked about the transit replacement parking, so I just want to be clear that yes, the parking is now open. So for the last 2 or maybe 3 years, we have not had the ability to do park and ride. There's been very restricted parking because it was been a construction site. But right now, you know, there is parking there. It's integrated within the Union Grantville site, so it doesn't have a, you know, it doesn't look like the old parking lot before. But, you know, just wanted to let everybody know that there are now park and ride options here, and that working on signage and making sure it's clear. But yes, people who are non-residents can go to our Grantville station today and go ahead and park and hop on a trolley line. Looking forward to Rancho Bernardo, another Affirmed project, the Skyline project. The construction is start late 2023. At this station, they have 84 transit reserve parking spaces, 38 for the office, and 76 for the residential parking spaces. And that also is unique in that this project will bring in MTS approximately $34,000 a year in office revenue to MTS. So where we once had just a parking lot, now we will have residential parking And we also have an office component, which will bring in additional revenue to the agency. 12th and Imperial right now is pretty exciting. We've got an ENA and a collaboration agreement with the San Diego Foundation. San Diego Foundation reached out to us, and they are a 501c3, and they do local philanthropic nonprofit kind of capital for affordable and housing needs. And they do that through this housing impact fund, which they have set up on their own. And in the collaboration agreement that we have with them, we're working towards, we set a couple of goals and policy objectives so that the eventual site that does get built will integrate the transit center improvements that are planned already, and that we will maximize density. Being downtown San Diego seems like a very good place to go, as high as we possibly can. And we want, of course, then that the units are, or excuse me, the homes are equitable and economically integrated housing. So you don't just want to completely separate everything. We want affordable workplace market rate homes here. That's what our goal is. And this is sort of our, once again, our guiding principles moving forward as we jump into the next stage, which would be the developer competition in late 2023. And additionally, we also want to promote resident and visitor use of the transit center, make sure everybody utilizes transit as much as possible, either through design, and then incorporate sustainable building features, and then of course the prevailing wage and skilled labor requirements. So that is an exciting opportunity there. Buyer Boulevard, we've partnered with Affirmed again. We have 100 homes there. The construction is supposed to start in the first half of 2024. So this project is moving quite along. Already has the DDA and the signed. And here we have approximately 74 transit reserved parking spaces and 60 residential parking spaces. These are approximate because we've had a little design changes. We wanted to preserve the historic railroad corridor for any future transit improvements. So that will shift the Affirmed footprint, kind of push their footprint a little further north, but then a little further to the west. So the idea was we just needed to protect that corridor. It's always good to have land around the our big transportation corridors here. So for future long-term, 20, 50 years in the future here, we don't all of a sudden have a building in the way of maybe a third track or something else like that. So so they're reconfiguring their design. We'll shift some of the parking and some of the unit counts, but we think it will still meet the original terms of what they provided. So once again, Palm Avenue Station, this is a partnership with National Core and Malik Infill Development. So it is an affordable and a workforce development. And what's currently proposed as 4 buildings, but as Palm has gone through, the Palm team has gone through, their redesign, and they're working with staff on trying to make the buildings more economically easier to be built. And so these numbers are this is what the original proposal, and we look to bring back, refine the design with the Palm team of Natcor and Malik, and bring this back to the board in 2024 with a revised plan. But right now, this is the proposal. Once again, affordable and workforce housing mixed together down at the Palm Avenue Station. Moving to the South Bay, just a quick high overview again. Once again, red is under contract and the green stars are the opportunity sites. 24th Street received a notice of interest from the National Core and Malik team through the Surplus Land Act process. And moving south into Chula Vista, E Street, we're working on a joint development with the city of Chula Vista. Bayview Point is our selected developer. H Street still requires a Surplus Land Act notice, and there is significant parking needs required there. That is one of our more heavily parked sites. And that is still an opportunity site. Had some interest, but we're still working with the folks there. And at Palomar, we have a notice of interest from National Core and Malik as well. E Street is a joint development with the city of Chula Vista. We went through joint RFQP with the city of Chula Vista. The exclusive negotiation agreement was executed in November 2023 with Mountain West Real Estate. You can see there, this is the plan that they had originally submitted. This is going to be a very mixed use development. The developers had quite a challenge here. They had essentially the city saying, when the RFQP went out, the city's priorities were office, kind of highest to lowest order as far as building types they wanted was office, hotel, retail, market rate housing, and affordable housing. And our priorities were almost at MTS were largely just flipped in mirror. So the developer folks community had quite the challenge there, but we did find a lot of success with Mountain West, or a lot of potential with the Mountain West site design. Don't get too married to this diagram here. We've been working with the city of Chula Vista and the Mountain West team, and we're coming up with a lot of really good improvements and trying to redesign to meet some of the city's goals here. As far as, good, city and urban planning, as well as making sure, the E and F street grade separations are maintained as well. So the long plan for the grade separation is to put the trolley in a trench here to reduce the grade crossing issues. And so that required a bit of a moving of the developable footprint. So this was the site plan that they had proposed, and we're working with the developer community and the city of Chula Vista to come up with a final plan. And the critical path here is the DDA is required by the end of 2024. So we look forward to bringing this back to board with a more updated plan. And that's where the status of the East Street is. So moving to the East County and Southeast San Diego areas. Once again, red under contract, green is an opportunity site. We have the El Cajon Transit Center. This is a joint development with the city of El Cajon that we partnered with. We selected Chelsea as with an E&A back in 2022. And as we heard out in La Mesa, we have Spring Street with Affirmed, and the two opportunity sites are 70th Street and Amaya stations. And then moving to Lemon Grove, Massachusetts, it's still an opportunity site as well. So right now at the city we partnered with the city of El Cajon to work on the El Cajon Transit Center project with Chelsea Investment Corporation. They have proposed 122 affordable homes and 177 workforce homes there in the two different building configurations. We were approximately 360 transit parking spaces were proposed and in the original Chelsea proposal. But as we talked about at Spring Street, and as we've gotten the more numbers that Dennis and Karen have been discussing, we're looking to possibly reduce that a bit to match the actual needs and then some of the future needs and find that balance of a sweet spot. So we think that number will probably go down, which Chelsea is very happy to hear that. Parking is roughly 50,000 per space in a parking garage to construct. So anyway, like I said, the E&A was executed November 22, and staff is going to finalize the parking count with Chelsea and the city, and work on the final details of the site design and bring this back to the board for disposition development agreement in 2024. Spring Street, we can probably just move over pretty quickly. The original proposal was 152 homes. As Karen's pointed out, that's now down to 147. E&A in February 22, and we're going through the parking comments, and we will bring a DDA back to the board in October. So this is now kind of shifting from where MTS is the developer to where MTS is maybe a little more passive and just has land that is not maybe highly utilized or is best utilized is just being held onto by MTS. So these are real estate transactions with benefit transit-oriented development at 6645 Woodman Street. It's our Woodman Street substation. That's why we have this property here. It's across the street from the trolley line. The trolley line is across on the other side. And so we put the substation on the east side of the property, and essentially the west side is kind of underutilized. So their neighbors there are the CRP Affordable Housing and Community Development LLC, and they approached us trying to to purchase the remainder portion of our property that is being unused. And so they can integrate it into their transit-oriented development. And you can see there on the right, a little flyer that they've got for the Encanto Gateway project. They're looking at 100% affordable, 30 to 60% AMI, and they're looking at 65 homes for their development. And this will be, can't really happen without our sales. So we will, get rid of some of excess property that we do not need. And this will benefit the local community as well as the neighboring transit-oriented development, which will then, of course, feed into our 67th Street station, which is approximately half a mile away. We're in a purchase and sale agreement, and that was recently extended till the end of this month. This site is a little more complicated here at 5801 and 5805 Fairmount Avenue. Our current tenant is the auto auction of San Diego. This property was acquired when we built the current present day Green Line. And it right now is just being utilized as, a small amount of revenue from this tenant. We were approached by the property owner to the north, 4D Properties, aka Eldorado Properties, and they were looking to develop their property in the Grantville area. And they thought they could do that better, once again, if they were to acquire some of the MTS site that we are not really using for transit. This site is really not something as a standalone site that can be developed on our own with maybe one of our affordable partners. It's just basically two site constricted, right? The viaduct goes over it, there's a traction powered substation out there. And then we have the City of San Diego future relocation of Alvarado Canyon Road, which adds a tremendous amount of uncertainty here. So while the city is moving forward plans and we are in touch with their engineers, and we have a general idea of, we have a pretty good idea of where the city is going to put the road. There is no official designation yet. But by, selling this property, MTS gets a little bit of revenue, one-time revenue, and it integrates into the neighboring property, which then they could more further develop their site, making the Grantville area more transit-oriented, development friendly. And this will also, part of when we acquired the property back in the 2000, I can't remember exactly when now off the top of my head, but when we acquired the property with the intent that we would hold the property for the City of San Diego so that the City of San Diego does not essentially have to purchase the right of way. It was a joint deal back when the Green Line was constructed. So we're looking at deed restrictions and portion of the sale so that, when we do transfer the property to 4D Properties, they will still have the same restriction that the Alvaro Canyon Road project at this location will not have to go out and purchase right away, because it was all considered back when MTS acquired the property, or MTDB acquired the property originally for the Green Line extension. So it protects the road realignment, and we think it'll make the larger community. In addition to it will add value to the community, and once again, the more transit-oriented development around our stations, the more likely we will get ridership there. So. And this is sort of the big board, the big chart. The green numbers are the kind of the more exciting ones that we've moved forward with. We've gone from 250 and 126 units, homes from under construction into now the almost occupied. So the affirmed development here will be coming online and being open late this year, early next year. And, you can see some of the older Morena Linda Vista going back to 2007. As well as, our current sites that we have now. So the Malik, Natcor, Palm Station, Bayer, Rancho Bernardo, East Street, the proposed home counts here is what you see on this chart with a grand total of approximately 3,000 homes. So. And so lastly, we have a public website. So if anybody wants to have more information about these stations, whether it just be a curious member of the public or a future developer, you can always direct anybody giving you inquiries, say, check out the MTS real estate website. We have one page documents talking about the sites that are available. These are sites that have been generally pre-screened by MTS as saying, yes, these are appropriate for transit-oriented development. Staff has already had that internal review. And these, as you can see, for the Maya trolley station, I just pulled an example here. It has the jurisdiction, the APM acreage, the transit uses there, land designations, and then, if we have any, known information that we can provide the development community. So at Maya, there is a large City of San Diego water pipeline that traverses the site. So any future developer would have to probably work around that. So if we have any knowledge, we put that up there. So, and in my short tenure of this position, I've noticed that anybody on the elected officials of the board, whenever they tweet or make a comment, my phone lights up. So if you're looking to generate interest in your particular municipality, please go ahead and do that. I will be ready to pick up the phone. But with that, I'll leave it for questions and comments.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. The original DRA, please unmute yourself now.
$50,000 for a parking space. I feel like we could charge a little bit more. Maybe you could find a better, more expensive product to use. Also, the density. I mean, you guys are doing really good at these 15-minute cities, right? And I just feel though that it's not dense enough. Do people really need, how much space do they really need? Like a closet size is probably good. And that way you can just, stack and pack as many people near that transit as possible. I mean, and what the heck, why need parking spots, right? Because I mean, we don't want people to drive. I mean, that is like ruining the climate. And so it's really important that we make sure that people quit driving, right? So I also think like with the transit, because, when we get into the actual 15-minute zone, you just might as well do a loop where it's like, they just kind of take you around. It's almost like an amusement park ride. And you just have like, here's your hospital, here is your grocery store, there's your library, here's a school, right? And there's maybe a park in the middle or something. But that way we just don't have to worry about people leaving that zone, because that gets dangerous. And it's like, we don't need to have some kind of enforcement that does it. It's like, you just keep them in a constant loop, right? And just keep riding around. I mean, and people will you could pay them to do it too, because I know people are wanting that universal basic income. So you could just pay them to go on those
30
rides
seconds left.
and have AI. I mean, because we need to bring AI into this, because I feel like AI should be running everything. I mean, you guys' job would be obsolete at that point, right? So we really need to bring that in so that nobody really needs to do anything, and we'll just be happy, and then we can eat bugs. I'm just really looking forward to this, but you guys need to do more density, think smaller and more compact, and like people just don't really need a whole lot of space. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. Don't think of like
Your time has expired. Leif Genzer, please unmute yourself now.
Hi there, my name is Leif Gensert. I'm a member of RIDESD. It's great to see MTS taking on transit-oriented developments. We love to see this more. We like density. I've been to the Palm Avenue station a bunch of times. There's a giant parking lot right there, which to my knowledge is completely underused. So it is great to see MTS doing more in terms of building housing close to transit. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. All right, we'll open up to board discussion, beginning with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. On the Grantville station with Graystar, I see we have 100 transit spaces. What did we have before the construction? Anybody know?
Oh, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can research it and bring it up, but 100 to 200 is my guess, but I don't remember.
More than 100 or less than 100?
We definitely had way more. I think we went down to about 50%. And then we had a dirt lot for like overflow for like Charger games that wasn't in that count. But I think we did about 50%. So I think there was around 200 in that lot.
So where I'm going is the prior thing, we set aside projected growth in demand for parking spots at the Spring Street station, going from 159 to 242 to accommodate the 2035 plan. In the Grantville, we kind of went backwards. I'm not understanding there. So for the 84 in Rancho Bernardo, the 74 for Bayer Boulevard, are those increase over current transit spots to accommodate for 2035?
Can I just clarify on Grantville though? the rationale for us buying all of that land was not necessarily just to have parking for the transit center. We bought all that land, complicated discussions with the property owners, but also the Alvarado Road was going to be going through the property. So there was a lot of reasons, and we've never really needed that much parking at Grantville.
Well, and I guess just to kind of a little bit take it back of like, how have we decided on these parking numbers? You know, as we kind of did our resurgence of TOD, you know, starting in 2018 and really started looking at it, it was somewhat ad hoc. And so what we did is we had monthly parking counts at our stations. And so we would use that monthly parking count to say, what is our current need? So it wasn't the most official scientific way, but it was like every month the security team would go to the parking lot and count how many cars were parked there, and they would record that on a spreadsheet. And so at Grantville, we looked at that number. We had some spaces there that we actually, transit riders weren't using. We were leasing them to a local language school that was in a building nearby. So those weren't really being used for transit riders. And so we were trying to achieve the same thing of what do our current riders need versus what is like, but we didn't have any projections for future. So like at Grantville, when we came to the 100, it was pretty consistent with the number of people that we thought were currently parking there. And so that was that same number. The Palm was the most complicated because when the pandemic hit, you know, the numbers that we had on those monthly parking counts from before the pandemic were much higher than what our current parking counts were at Palm. And so we were kind of in a little bit of a push and a pull of like, which number do you rely on? And we didn't have a full study, and we didn't have anything that was telling us what do we need in the future. And so that's why we did the study. But some of those parking numbers of those OTDs was us trying to guess at what our current parking need was and use that number, but not building into the parking requirements what we might need in the future. So, but that is why we've looked at, you know, like H Street is a very prominent site in Chula Vista, but it is pretty much 100% parked all the time. And we have a lot of transit that goes in there. And so we've held off a little bit on coming up with a design that we want to look at it a little bit more closely soon, but we don't want to take away every space where then there's nowhere to expand a bus bay. Or, you know, it might be that as we have these needs, there's funds to build a standalone parking garage just for transit in some of these and have kind of parking nodes. And those would be future decisions for the board to make. But the parking counts from these have been more based on what we could come up with is what we thought was our current need, but we didn't have like very official data to back it up. So, and then the pandemic made us question the data we did have.
So it sounds like some of the transit-oriented sites, we are just replacing our current need, and in other transit-oriented sites, we're adding projected growth based on Sandag's plan. How do we decide which site fits which methodology?
I think it depends to some on what the ridership is at that site of like how many people do we think are coming? You know, some of the farther ones, and I think, you know, we've looked at we're working right now through that issue at Elkhorn. And so we're trying to figure out what that number is. And originally we had felt that's one of the end of the lines where we have a lot of people from further East County that don't have really good bus connections to get there. And so if we want them to ride transit, we need to acknowledge that they're going to drive their car to that station to get on the transit. And we can't assume that they'll get on like a bus ride to get there. And so those were ones where we're a little more worried about giving up too many parking spaces and limiting our ability, you know, for transit in the future there. But we are looking at those numbers. So the first number we had told them is we want almost 100% parking replacement as part of this project, and we'll give you the space to do it, which was about that 360 number. Since then, the study has come back, and I will present it, but I think it's 255 is the number that they actually said is current need and 2035. And so that was a number that's a lot more achievable for the development to produce, but it also, according to the study, would have us meet that 2035 need. So, but some of it is going to be judgment calls, and we'll bring that to the board to be like, this is how we got to that number, you know, of where and why. But we don't want locations that are less urban and don't have as many connections. We feel like are more likely you're going to need parking for people to transit parking for people to do. So that was why we tried really hard at Rancho Bernardo to lose as few spaces as possible. Like that location, that lot had 105 spaces to, today, and we only allowed them to take 20 away. So we're getting 84 replacement parking spaces in that specific lot, because at Rancho Bernardo, most people that are using that location up in North County are gonna have to drive there. They're not necessarily, there's, I think, one, maybe 2 bus routes that go to that station, so.
So it sounds like you're saying it depends on the site because we'd hate to give up 20 in Rancho Bernardo when we're trying to go forward with more spaces for 2035, but the site of Rancho Bernardo just doesn't accommodate that growth. So it's site dependent.
It is.
The answer. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the board? Member Moreno.
I just want to commend Sean. Thank you so much for this presentation. I think this gives us a very clear outlook of what we've, well, not outlook. It gives us a really clear map of what we've been approving and what is to come into the future. And just, I think this is your first committee. I might be wrong, but welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. These are fun informational items when you get to talk about the good things that are happening and the buildings that are coming online. So.
Thank you, Member Moreno, and I'll dovetail on what Member Moreno said. I mean, it's always great to get presentations on the individual projects that we are looking at and pursuing, but to get a holistic view like this, where, you know, cumulatively, we're either developing or facilitating, you know, as many as 3,000 units. I mean, that's not an insignificant chunk of the total multifamily housing units that are being built in this area. So really appreciate what the staff is doing to bring all this housing about. And of course, the more than 3,000 people that will be living in those units, many of them will be transit riders, which is a win all the way around. So thank you very much for the presentation. All right, we'll move along to item number 8 now, and that is an update on the Clean Transit Advancement Campus. And we'll hand it off to Ms. Landers and Mr. Desmond again.
All right. I think this is our last item for the day. So thank you for bearing with us. This is another exciting project. We just wanted to give you a little update on where we are in this project. So the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, that is the new 6th bus division that the board approved a preferred site for and a mitigated negative declaration under CEQA back in October of 2022. And so since then, we have moved forward on next steps, and I want to give you an update. But what that division is that it would, because we need that division, because as we transition over to zero emission buses, the charging infrastructure that we have to install at each location is going to displace about 20 to 25% of our buses. And so we'll lose capacity at some of our existing bus divisions. And then also for future growth, we are already at capacity. And so if we want to grow transit service at all, we need to have a new division. And so that's where the 6th bus division came in to kind of handle both of those issues. This will be our first fully 100% ZEB infrastructure facility. There would be no CNG fueling at that site. And then it was sized and designed with the future system. I should have let Dennis do this thing. This is his wheelhouse, but to meet our needs for the RTP. And then we selected that location because of where our transit needs are and future growth, like in that kind of core of the region is where we're going to see the most growth and need. And so it doesn't make sense to put a bus division much further out because of the travel time that there would be to get the buses into position to run those new routes. So just to remind everyone, this is the preferred site. It is on Federal Boulevard at 47th Street. These are the 2 sites. So it's actually 4 different parcels. So 4 different ownership groups for the property. And you know, again, October of 2022, the board selected that site and complied with CEQA. And so then after that, what we've been doing is, because we know that there's going to be federally funds that we're going to need to build this project, we had to go through the FTA's National Environmental Policy Act environmental review process that picked up where we left off in CEQA. Wasn't a lot to that, but that process just takes time. And so it wasn't until July that we got the FTA's clearance under NEPA that the property was essentially exempt. They call it a categorical exclusion. And so we've moved on then to do some phase 2 environmental assessment, just to check to where we're physically allowed to get onto the property and check what the soil conditions are. Those are things that wouldn't impact really the project. It just lets us know if there's contaminated soil or other environmental issues that are really on the ground that we're going to need to factor into the design of our project or the value of the property that we'll be acquiring. So what our current activities is moving forward with those phase 2 environmental assessments. We also are preparing and finalizing a real estate acquisition management plan that's required under federal law to just guide the acquisition process, make sure we comply with the various rules and laws about that. We also have appraisals underway for the Site 7 properties. We weren't actually allowed to negotiate with any property owners until we completed that FTA NEPA process, which is a little frustrating because you want to keep them informed and you want to be involved in them, but the law doesn't allow us to actually negotiate with them. And so we finally, in July, were able to start negotiating with some of those property owners. And so we've got informal discussions underway with 3 of the 4 property owners. One of them hasn't really responded to us. So once we have the appraisal complete, we'll take some more actions to try to get them to talk to us. But what we would anticipate is coming back to the board in closed session in October, once we have those appraisals, to get a negotiating authority that would give us the right to actually make a formal offer to acquire property from anyone who's willing to sell. And then we're actively working on applying for grants for design and construction of the project. You know, our current estimated project cost is about a $300 million project. We do have sufficient funding right now in the current CIP program that we think will be enough to cover both the acquisition costs for the property and some of the preliminary design work. But then we're working to get funding for actual construction and next phases. So that's a quick, update. I just wanted to let you all know what's coming down the pipeline. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. All right, clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do the original DRA. Please unmute yourself now.
I'd like to know if you've done an assessment on the health hazards of all of these electric vehicles and the charging stations and what that would mean for people riding this transit and or working in it or on it, being that they, all of these vehicles or buses are combustible, and with these lithium batteries, they explode and it's like a bomb and they'll just keep exploding. What would you do in that case that happened and people were on it? Because even if you just put these buses next to each other and one of them ignites, they all blow up. So you're just basically making bombs for people to, be riding in. But outside of that, the radiation that comes off of that and those charging centers are going to be off the chart. So have you done any kind of study to see what the health effects of radiation are on the public when you're putting all of these when you have all these plans to go to electric? It doesn't seem very, of sound mind when you guys will never acknowledge that. You have your plans because you just, you need to go to net zero, but you're not really, and you're talking about to save the environment, but then you're putting people's lives in danger by having them work on those buses, be near those buses. Asking anybody to drive an electric vehicle. So any of the transit that you're using to get people around from one spot to another, those are death chambers and nobody is acknowledging that. So I'd like to know when you're going to do a study on not only the health hazards, but the effects of these lithium batteries when they combust and somebody runs into a bus and they explode. What are you going to do then? Just when the problem comes, acknowledge it, or are you going to
expired? That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, clerk. We will now open board discussion on this item, beginning with Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair Whitburn. I want to start off by saying thank you for the presentation. We've had quite a few community meetings and definitely heard concerns from community members even in this boardroom. So, but I will say that a lot of the feedback kind of has been taken in up to this point. And so I hope that we continue on that path. I am excited about this update and this project. And I do want to thank the public constituents within Canto, the Eastern and Mid-City community planning areas. They have insisted on being as informed as possible. And so we want to continue to do that. I did, and this kind of piggybacks back into the PLA conversation, kind of starting early to ensure that this project does have, we're intentional about the community benefit discussion around this project from the very beginning. So I just want to put that on the table as well. And then thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. Any further board discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to our other items. We'll begin with a review of next week's draft MTS board agenda.
I have one change that I'd like to make, and that is on consent. We have an item to go to open payments on Pronto, but we also have a report on Pronto later in the agenda. So I would just want to meld those and make them a discussion item. So we'll be taking that up with your approval as one of the discussion items or later in the agenda.
Very good. That'll be for action.
And we just may have one additional consent item. We had been doing an update to our travel policy, and I wasn't sure if it was going to make it next week or if we would have to delay it till October, but I think that the revisions would be ready for next week. So that may also be on the consent calendar.
Do you need a motion?
We haven't typically, but I'm happy. I will say that it's just to update the travel policy. It's not making substantive changes. It just changes a little bit of our process and then updates according to some of the federal schedules of what the allowed rates are.
Very good. And the fare collection system, that'll be a potential action item then? on
Yes,
the
so
agenda.
item 11 was to approve a amendment to
Yep.
pay for the system changes.
Yep.
And so it just didn't make sense to have that on consent and then you actually get a report on it
Very good.
later.
Okay, there was some interest in that in the public comments earlier this morning.
Chair?
Yes.
We do have a public comment for item number 9.
Oh, okay. Please proceed.
Manny Rodriguez, please make your way to the podium.
Hey, board. Good to, executive committee, better said. Good to see you all this morning. I'm here to speak in support of also the Pronto action item to improve it to open payments. I use Pronto. I have my Pronto Padres card right here, but I can't deny that a lot of tourists and new transit users do, have complications with the Pronto system. If you've been outside, Snapdragon Stadium, for example, you see the long line formed around the Pronto readers, and the readers can also be affected by various weather conditions. So, to make the system more accessible and easier to use for first-time transit users and, tourists, the tap to pay would be, or the open payments would be, very useful. So I still think, and it'll be, if I understand this correctly, it will be in addition to the current Pronto system. So the current Pronto card, like the one I use, will still be in effect. So thank you, and I hope you include that in the agenda for next week's board meeting.
The original DRA, please unmute yourself now.
I just want to say, you guys always put all this stuff on consent, and those are all, that's a lot of items to be doing that with. So you basically leave the public no opportunity to discuss certain things when you have such a limited amount of time and you've got like 20 items on the consent calendar. You guys just started doing this when you started to get public comment more and more. And it's sad because you sit there and talk about how you want to hear from the people, but then you're doing everything in your power to silence them as much as possible through that. And, I don't know if I know why you're doing it, but you should give people, at least if there's, more than 1 or 2 items that they want to speak on, a little bit more time so that they can address certain things, because this is the people's money that you're spending. And, you don't want people to be able to dissent from you, but when you're doing things that aren't in line with everybody, that's what happens. And that's what your job is you're servants to the people. And the more and more opportunities you take away from the people to, just redress the things that you're engaging in is very negligent, because it shows that you don't care what the people say, because you're literally put in every meeting. If you guys could, you put everything on consent, and that's basically what you're doing. So, if you really cared about what people thought, then you would make a way for people to actually be able to comment on more than, just a couple of items when you're spending our money. So,
30 seconds left.
it's not fair to the people when you guys, just do that and you think that you're being like good to the people, but it's showing that you're not, and that you don't really care what they say. And it's very sad because you're paid to be up there. So, you should listen to what the people say when you're supposed to be representing them, not yourselves and your, people that puppet you around. So, whatever.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Mic on here. We will look forward to next week's board agenda then. Are there any other staff communications or business? Seeing none. Any other committee member communications or other business? Seeing none. Our next meeting date is October 12th. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.